Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our talk, Case Study Design for Social Scientists. This talk is organized by Center for Applied Psychology, University Tunku Abdul Rahman, Gampar campus. So I'm Suwan. I will be your moderator for this event. So this talk, as you noticed just now, this talk will be recorded and purely for knowledge sharing purpose only. So very thanks to Prof. Dr. Noriah give us the consent to record the video as well. So we have the great honors, as you can see, and precious to have Prof. Dr. Noriah Mohd Ishak as our speaker today. Prof. Noriah actually, she just retired, but she's still holding many posts, as you know. Prof. Noriah is an honoris fellow of Women's and Leadership Centers, UKM's, Senior Educational Consultants of Yayasan Pahang, and Deputy Chairpersons from International Association on Talent Development. Prof. Noriah holds a PhD degree in Counseling Psychology from Western Michigan's University, USA. Prof. Noriah also has a lot of knowledge as a consultant, educator, lecturers, researcher, and administrators. Research and publication area are emotional intelligence, general intelligence, counseling and psychology, and gifted education. Also have conducted a lot of qualitative research training since 2004. So we are really happy to have you with us, Prof. Noriah, to share us about his study. So let us welcome Prof. Dr. Noriah Mohd Ishak. So Prof, can you share your screens right now? To try to share it. So let's see how.
Let me see if I.
Yeah, you take your time. We can look.
This is the one.
Can
everyone see my screen? Can
yeah.
You see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it clearly right now.
Okay, that's good.
So now I pass the floor to you. Prof, is it okay for you?
Yes. Yeah.
So
that's
if there's
fine.
any technical things, I will just unmute my mic and remind you. Okay?
Yeah. Remind me of the time. I might go on and on and on.
Yeah, I know that you used to speak for like 3 hours or more than that for the sharing.
Non-stop, yes.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you with us to give us some ideas about case studies. So
okay, thank you.
About the time as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Suwan and Dr. Ko and everyone. Good morning. Assalamualaikum to the Muslims. I'm so happy that Dr. Suwan got in touch with me and asked me to deliver, I would say a short speech on case study design for social scientists. I was the first social scientist awarded excellent scientist by Ministry of Higher Education way back in 2005. And I said, yeah, social scientists can actually go beyond, our normal research, and we always feel inferior because we don't see our instruments in front of us, like the bottles and the glasses and all that. But actually, social scientists' work has a lot of meaning in our daily functioning. So I'm glad that I'm able to share this design with you. Actually, case study design is one of the design in in qualitative research. There's so many other designs, and each one is unique by its own design. And by the way, Dr. Suwan, thank you for the introduction. Okay, let me go to my second slide. Oh, okay. Okay. Now, this is what I'm going to be discussing for these 2 hours. So I would like our participant to just ask me questions if you have any, just on your mic and ask me questions as I go along in terms of my presentation. So if you have queries, or if you have doubts, or you have hunches that you want to ask me, just go right ahead. So for the next 2 hours, what I would be discussing would be, I would be talking about case study as a research strategy, and then how to design a case study, how to conduct a case study, Of course, what kind of evidences, source of evidences that you could look for when you are doing a case study design, and how do you select your informants, or sometimes people call it participants, that gives you information, and how do you analyze your case study evidences. The only thing that I'm not including is the analyzing using en vivo atlas. That's another story, a 3-hour story if you want to do that. So these will be the things that I would be discussing for these 2 hours. Now, let me just give you an overall overview of what case study strategy is about, what case study is used for. Yeah. If you look at case study, you're always asking questions of how and why. Oh, did I go to this one just now? Yeah, how and why questions. People always say you can always ask what and when, but that's not the main questions in terms of case study. There are 3 types. Generally, there are 3 types of case study where you can do an explanatory case study, or exploratory case study, or descriptive case study. These 3 types of case study. But it depends on what kind of questions you want to ask. Let's say you want to ask how to explain something. That is an explanatory case study. You want to ask the questions of how that happened and why it happened, then it becomes an exploratory case study. But if you want to ask the questions of why these things happen, why COVID spread in a community, then it is a descriptive case study. So depending on what kinds of questions you post, or you would like to post for your research, in your research, then that defines your case study. And also, when you do case study, when you have little control over the events. I mean, when you collect your data in certain phenomena, you have no control of what's going on in whatever happens there. And it focuses on contemporary phenomena in some real life context. A good example is our COVID-19 issues, right? People not using masks, people are not doing social distancing and things like that. These are contemporary phenomena within a real life context. And you can actually do case studies on this one. Case study, believe me or not, is an empirical inquiry, which means that it has steps, it has specific steps, accurate steps. You have to take into consideration the validity, the reliability of the internal validity of the construct, things like that, which we only think that it happens in quantitative studies. But in case studies, you actually have to consider all these things. So it is considered as a very empirical research, an empirical inquiry, and it's very comprehensive in terms of its research steps and strategies. So believe me, if you do a case study as your PhD or as your research, you will feel very enriched with the data, and you will feel that you have all the right steps that would say, I did a very good research. No, it used to be people would be thinking like, you do a case study? How sure are you that what people said is what you actually tell us? You know, that kind of feelings that you get when you do a case study. But it is an empirical inquiry. It is a comprehensive research. It is a very good research that has step-by-step design. Yeah, and it asks the questions of why and how, depending on whether you want to do explanatory, exploratory, or descriptive. That is the general overview of what case study research as a research strategy. So if you look at in which situations you can apply case study, there's so many. Name it political, let me move this one down here. You can do it in political science area, you can do it in public management or public administration, of course, psychology and sociology, medical and medical education, organizational management, regional planning. The areas that you can apply case study is so vast. You know, depending on how you want to look at the phenomenon and how you want to question the phenomenon, it can be applied in many, many fields. Yeah. Now, if you look at, again, I am having this next. Okay. If you look at the components of the case study research, for the first 10 minutes or so, I'm going to just bring you briefly into the process before I actually go into detail with all the processes. Yeah. So if you look at the case study design, it is just like any other research. You must have research questions. Yeah. So what are the questions you would like to ask? Just now we talked about the how, why, and how and why. It is basically those kind of questions. And it needs a proposition. Propositions are just like variables, independent variables, dependent variables. If you look at Robert Yin's book of case study research, he described dependent and independent variables as part of the proposition. It's like a variables that you study in your quantitative research. Because having the research question will not guide you in your research, but having the propositions or the variables help guide you in the research, what to look for in the data. Yeah. So without the proposition, it's going to be very, very difficult. Now, units of analysis is actually the cases that you want to study. People always think that case study means it's the phenomena that you study. No, it's actually the informant, the cases, or the interviewee, or the people who bring you information, so evidences. Those are the cases that you study. And these people would then tell us about patterns of how and why within the phenomena. So these people are called units of analysis. But the unit of analysis can be more than just a people. It can be a group of people, it can be an organization, it can be a neighborhood, things like that. And then once you have your proposition, once you have your question that is linked to your propositions, and you have chosen your unit of analysis, then you get your data. Then you have to link your data to the proposition. That's why the proposition is important, to guide you, to help you look at what kind of information should I be looking at in my data before you interpret the findings. Because when you do your qualitative research, the data is humongous. Just imagine when I did my research on emotional intelligence, that was the first research done in Malaysia, I interviewed about 360 people. But of course, I used 15 graduate assistants to help me with lots of software, parrots and all that, but 360 people. So the data was so humongous that it took us 1 year, or more than 1 year, to analyze the information and what to look for. So it's always going back to your propositions and your data and how you link the data with the proposition before you can actually interpret findings. Is everything okay so far? Okay, good. Okay. Now, I'm having difficulty. Okay. Now, so these are some of the examples of research study, case study research questions that I thought of on top of my head. For instance, how COVID-19 virus spread from the community. How? Yeah. Why bulimic patients lost their weight over a very short period of time. Why Asian parents are more domineering in their parenting styles. I'm talking about me. How treatment is planned in palliative care among terminally ill patients with various illnesses. So you see a pattern of how this palliative care is done on the patients. Why children with divorced parents develop separation anxiety, and how do the behaviors manifested over a period of time. So this is the why and the how descriptive exploratory case study. Yeah, why merger happened and how the merger is conducted within financial institutions. Why do organizations collaborate with one another to provide joint services? So there's so many questions that you can ask, and these questions are not answerable with quantitative research. I mean, you cannot answer why bulimic patients lost their weight over a period of time with, let's say, running an ANOVA or MANOVA or even Listrel or even EMOS. You cannot do that. So there are research questions that you might want to answer through this kind of research design. Yeah, but you can always mix it. You can always have certain questions on the quantitative portion and certain questions on the qualitative portion. I would normally start my qualitative case study design first, then I do the quantitative, because I wanted to explore and find out what's happening before I can develop an instrument or whatever it is to measure the phenomenon that I would like to study. So these are the things that I would do. Now, the proposition that I talked about just now, yeah? Actually, preposition directs our attention to something that should be examined within the scope of the study. So, for instance, if I want to study how COVID-19 virus spread throughout the community, what would be the proposition that I would be thinking when I collect the data? You know, it could be spreading because people go home to see their parents, so I should be looking at information relating to people traveling back home, or people having party or kanduri or weddings. So I should be looking at those information. Those are again proposition. I should also be looking at people forgetting to do their SOP. So that's another one, that, you know, lack of discipline in enforcing their SOP. So those are the preposition. Yeah, it is not necessarily a one word that describes the proposition. It can be a string of words that describe the preposition. That's why they're not called a variable in that sense, because it can be defined in more than one word. Yeah. So I have an example there. Assuming the research question is how and why do organizations collaborate with one another to provide joint services? So here the proposition would be, it drives mutual benefits, similar recruitment policies, common training facilities. You know, these are the possible propositions. So the propositions are something that you want to think about at the beginning of your study, not while you're doing your study, because it's supposed to direct your study. Yeah. Without preposition, what happened would be the researcher might be tempted to collect everything, and it's impossible, because that's why people say when you do qualitative studies, it takes 10 years to do your PhD, or it takes longer years to do your PhD. No, actually, when you have a good framework, a good theoretical framework, and a good proposition coming up from the theoretical framework that will guide you in terms of choosing your data, then the study becomes more structured. So you can actually finish your case study research within 3 years or 4 years. So that's not a problem. Is everyone okay? Okay, so just to wrap up, you have the research questions of how and why, and then you examine your proposition, look at the proposition must be linked to your research questions, and then you look for the evidence within the guideline of the prepositions and your research question. Then it will be aligned. You know, it's always good to remember that when you do your research, everything from research questions to your method, to your analysis, it has to be aligned with each other. Or else you will have one research questions and one data that's not supporting your research question. So it's like putting your bull in front of your cart instead of your cart behind your bull. Oh, no, the other way around. Putting your carts in front of your bull. So your bull is actually driving your carts behind. So I always tell my PhD students, I said, no, you have to align to everything. And when you do your research, especially case study research, because you tend to get disarray, you tend to get absorbed in things that being mentioned by the participant, by the informants, because, you know, it's storytelling, narratives form. So the informant might be saying, story about collaboration, but he's talking about his hometown, things like that. And you tend, it's a very interesting stories, and you tend to listen to those things. So always go back to your research questions, always go back to examining your propositions, and always look for the evidences within these two guidelines. Yeah. Now, I talked about the unit of analysis. It can be an individual. It can be multiple individuals. It can be a unique, a single case study, multiple case studies, and it can be an organization. And also within the organization, you have many informants that you want to study. That's another design. You can have multiple organizations, a group, a neighborhood, multiple group, multiple neighborhood, many things that you can look at in terms of determining your unit of analysis when you do a case study design. You know? And these are the guidelines of how you choose your unit of analysis. Yeah. So when you want to choose your unit of analysis, first you must look at your research question. How do you define your research questions? What are you looking for? What are you looking for? I mean, if you look at COVID-19 within community, then the community members would be your unit of analysis. If you want to look at merger between organizations, then the organization per se becomes your unit of analysis. So the research questions, the definitions of the research questions actually define what kind of unit of analysis that you want to look at or you want to have. And also the preposition. The preposition will direct you to the evidences. So the evidences are very specific to the unit of analysis. Yeah. And also the literature, available literature. Because sometimes you want to compare your findings with the literature, right? So you need to make sure that your unit of analysis or the participant that you choose from is equivalent or parallel to the subjects mentioned in the literature review. Yeah. These are an example. These are my office, a photo of my, maybe some of you have seen Permata Pintar. Yeah. So this is my office. It can be a unit of analysis by itself. If I want to study how Permata Pintar developed its education for the gifted and talented, then it becomes a single case study where the unit of analysis is the center itself. Okay. Question?
I think, Prof, I think because we have Q&A session at 10:30, most likely they will only ask questions after 10:30. Maybe,
Okay.
yeah, if you don't mind, you can continue. Maybe they start to correct down, not down their question already. So they will start asking you at 10:30, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Is it okay for you?
Because when we do online, everybody's so quiet.
Yeah, they're supposed to be quiet, if not they will disturb you. So this is the disadvantage of having online talk. You can't see the expressions.
Okay, so you're talking to yourself. Okay, yeah. This is how you link data to preposition. This is by Campbell, 1975. So you have the preposition identified from your research question, and then you collect your data, right? And then the data are the evidences that is parallel to the preposition. And then you link it using many methods. One of it is pattern matching. And then you bring it back to your research questions. This is how you link the data to the preposition. Yeah, we will discuss this more later. So we have theoretical preposition. Theoretical preposition is just like your theoretical framework in the quantitative research. Yeah. So you can have your theoretical preposition beginning and then match it with the informations and the evidences. This is very different if you do, people always get mixed up with grounded theory approach. When you do grounded theory approach, for instance, you do not have theoretical preposition. You actually develop the theoretical preposition within the data that you collected. So you're not guided by anything. But in case study design, it is simpler because you have a theoretical preposition at the beginning of your study that you develop based on literature review or what have you. And then you look at your evidences and informations and match the two. That's how you look at the patterns developed in the case study design. Yeah? So this is one example of the analysis that we can use, time series patterns. There are many time series patterns that you see through over a period of time. But I wouldn't advise PhD students, for instance, or master students who have a very short period of time to do a time series analysis. With pattern matching would be a more reliable methods of analysis because this will take many, many years. Yeah. Now, criteria for interpreting findings, one is one data linked to the other. So when you do your interpretations of the findings, you must look at the link, the cause effect, things like that. And multiple cases leading to a pattern. You don't have one case, but you have many, many cases, many informants that could explain to you a pattern. Yeah? I will also discuss this in details afterwards. And pattern found through finding by matching theoretical preposition that I've mentioned just now, or comparing two rival prepositions. This is another way of interpreting your findings. So there's a lot of things that you can do to interpret the findings. I will discuss later More is just a teaser for you. Now, as I've mentioned just now, case study design has a theory that plays a role in it, as compared to phenomenology or as compared to ethnography or grounded theory. Of course, grounded theory's function is to develop theory. But for case study design, the role of the theory is very, very important. And we call it theory in development, which you create prior to the study. And again, it pictured the preposition. So the theory gives researchers what to explore, why you explore, and the criteria for judging the success of the exploration. So it's very, very important to have a theory at the beginning and to guide your whole research, case study research, based on the theory. Along the way, you might find that the theory expanded or the theory shrinks, but it's okay, because that's the role of the theory. The theory will guide you at the beginning, but the evidences that you find within your subject or within your informants might allows you to expand the theory. That's why we call it theory in development. So at the end of the research, a conclusion, you might have a concretized theory, or maybe the theory is still developing and someone else can continue the research for you. Yeah. So one of the most important role of the theory in qualitative research is doing generalization. We only talk about generalizations in quantitative studies where finding of a sample goes back to the populations, right? But here in case study design, what you do is whatever conclusion that you found at the beginning, then you compare it back to the theory at the beginning. At the end, compare it back to the theory at the beginning. This is called analytical generalization. So you generalize from the case to the theory that you use at the beginning of the study. You do it not only at the end, but you do it along the way. Let's say, for instance, you have a case and you see a pattern, then you compare that pattern with the theory. Then the theory might expand or might shrink, and then you have a new theory, and then you again do another case and you compare. Again, I will explain this afterwards. Yeah, and the theory becomes a template for whatever you're looking for in your data. And in that sense, if you use more than one sample, then you have a replication of logic. That means one person would say about the same thing as another person. So the logic of the story is there. Yeah. So then these two cases seems to support the same theory. So that means that your replication of logic in that story is what the theory is saying, the established theory is saying. So what you found in your study is logical. You can claim that. Yeah, you can claim that. So the story, the theory becomes a template for you to actually do all this process. Now, how do we judge a good case study design? As I've mentioned just now, this is it is an empirical inquiry, a very systematic scientific approach to doing research. So you need to judge your case study, whether be it through the construct validity or internal validity or external validity or reliability. You can do any of this and make sure that your study is valid. Yeah. For instance, the construct validity, which is to establish operational measures for the concept that you're studying, you can use multiple sources of evidence. That means when you collect your data, you don't rely on one source of evidence, let's say an interview. You can also do a document analysis. You can also do something else, a focus group, and making sure that triangulation happens. That means more than one data talks about the same thing. More than one evidences says about the same thing. And then you would establish chain of evidence and have a key informants review your draft case study. That means once you are done with the interview, for instance, then you transcribe the interview, give it back to your key informant for them to review the draft and say and see if what you have written in the draft is what exactly they mean when they were saying it to you. And then you can calculate your kappa value. Kappa value is a value that would actually help you it gives an index of what the validity would be. Maybe some people might not have heard about this. a kappa value, you can, it's a very simple calculation. It's like fx, your chances of getting it correct, minus fa, your, the calculation is simple, fc minus fa over n, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, you get a value that says, okay, the value that you get is good enough to say that you have a construct validity. Yeah, this is another lecture if you want to go into that. Internal validity, yeah, the pattern matching that you do during your data analysis, the explanation building, and also the time series analysis, these are internal validity. Because when you do pattern matching, you would find that you can establish causal relationship between one preposition to another preposition. Why this happened? Because this. Why that happened? Because that. How this happened? It's like this. And pattern matching from one case to another allows you to develop internal validity. That means your story, the narrative that you have is actually valid. If, let's say, you have a single case study, people might question you. Is this person trying, saying the right things, or are you getting the right information? But if you have like 10 people talking about the same thing, and these 10 people not knowing each other, that means you have developed a good pattern matching. It is a strong case of internal validity. Yeah. Your external validity, you use multiple case. That means when you have your case study design, you might want to choose like 6 or 10 or 12 people telling you about the story. So the replication of logic that I've mentioned earlier in multiple case study would help you develop the external validity, which is to establish the domain to which a study findings can be generalized. So if you have multiple cases telling the same things, and then it also aligns with the theory, that means you have the analytical generalization established. So this is in the research design. And the reliability, of course, in the reliability, it is the use of protocol. We will talk about this. Developing case study database, during data collection, it makes the study very reliable. When I did my case study, when I did my PhD, part of it was a case study. The examiners, or the committees that examined me, it was like 5 people, want to see the protocol. They want to see how you organize your study from the beginning to the end. That's the protocol. They want to see what are the questions you ask. That's is part of the protocol. They want to see how you keep your data. So you have to organize your data very well so that you don't lose any data, or the data is not mixed and all that. So they wanted to see all this established as part of the reliability. So the reliability is more of demonstrating the operations of the study is well developed. Yeah. So you can actually address the construct validity, the internal validity, the external validity, and the reliability at different phases of your study. But again, you don't have to do all. Yeah, you don't have to do all. You can do the construct validity and the reliability, or you can do the internal validity and the external validity. It's up to you. If you are how would I say, an aspiring researcher, that you might want to do all 4. That's fine also, because these are all within the process of doing the research. And this is very important to remember, because people then will not question your case study credibility. Yeah, it will increase the credibility of the study. Let's go to the next slide. What did I do? Okay. Oh, okay. The case study design. Yeah. So how do we design a case study? Now, it is very interesting. If you look at this, quadrants or whatever the table here. Just now I mentioned, in general, there are 3 case study can be categorized into 3 types: the exploratory, the explanatory, and the descriptive, right? But within those, there are actually 4 types of case study design, depending on how you choose your cases. You can have the holistic single unit of analysis, which is a type 1 in a single case design. You can have embedded or multiple units of analysis in a single case study design, or you can have a holistic and multiple case study design, which is a design 3, or you can have embedded multiple units of analysis in a multiple case design. Okay, this is what I mean. When you do a holistic single unit of analysis, single case design, that means you only have one person or one organization or one neighborhood or one community. You study only one case for some good reason. There are some good reasons you want to study only one case. Now, embedded single case design is different. Let's say you want to study an organization. Let's say, for instance, you want to study why this institution go through a merger process, right? But of course, in the organizations, there are many units of analysis, many people that you need to study in order to understand what goes on that makes the organization develop decisions to merge with another organization, right? So the multiple unit of analysis within the organization is representing the embedded design. It is an organization embedded inside. And a single, but it is still a single case design because you only choose one organization. But you can also have holistic and multiple case design where you have an organization per se, just a single without considering the people inside through observation and all that. Yeah. And you can have, of course, embedded and multiple. So there are 4 types of cases, case study design that you can actually do. Yeah. Okay. I seems to be having trouble going to the next slide. Okay. Now, why do you want to do a single case study? Yeah. There are many reasons why people want to do that. One is when it represents a critical case. A critical case. For instance, I wanted to study the thinking pattern of the longest serving prime minister in Malaysia. There's only one. So it's a critical case or a unique case. Normally critical cases are cases that without this particular case or informant, then you will not get data, right? Or when it represents an extreme or unique case, for example, a very rare clinical syndrome, someone get a very rare clinical syndrome, or very rare, and you want to study that particular conditions or what have you within the patient. Or when the case is seen as revelatory, it can reveal a lot of things. Without this particular single unit of analysis, you will not get this revelation, right? So these are why people do single case study design. But single case study design is a design that will not allow you to have replications of logic. So the issues of validity and reliability will be questions from this design. And another thing is that, I have seen 1 or 2 of my PhD students who wanted to do single case study, and I gave them a try because they did not want to listen to my advice. So they actually interviewed the particular person. Halfway through the interviewing, they were saying, I thought he is unique, but he's not. I found another person who's like him. And you have spent like 3 years studying this person, and you find that the patterns that the person is telling you is not unique at all. So that could be one of the setbacks of doing a case study design. It could be, the case might not be critical, or the case might not be extremely unique, or the case might not be laboratory after all. Yeah. So if you look at embedded case study design, this is how I explained just now. You have an organization, but within the organization, you have many people that you study. Yeah. So the single case study design becomes embedded case study design when it involves more than one unit of analysis, or we call it subunits within the organizations. Or maybe, let's say, within the organization, there are many departments, yeah, that you need to study. What would be the HR said about the merger? what would be the business unit A talks about the merger, business unit B talk about the merger. So it could be a person or it could be the subdivisions of the organization. Yeah. Now, this is again reason why we need to do multiple case study design. Just now is a single case, now multiple case. As I've mentioned just now, replication of logic is very important to increase your reliability or excellent validity. So this is an important step that you must do in your research. So it can only be reached when you do a multiple case design. It's an important step in all this replication procedure. Yeah, and it gives you a very rich theoretical, very rich data that then is developed into a very rich theoretical framework. So when you have many people talking about the same thing, it gives you a very rich data about the same pattern. Yeah? Ideally, it would have the literal and the theoretical application. So these are things that you get when you do a multiple case design. Each case must be carefully selected though, because when you choose multiple case study, you want to make sure that every case that you choose would predict similar results. That means they would be telling me more or less the same thing. There might be some variation, there might be some variant in terms of what they're saying, but the whole bulk, the chunk of the story or the chunk of the information or evidences must be similar to one another. So it's very predictable. If I say, go to the fourth case after hearing the first, second, and third, the fourth would say something that I have heard before from case 1, case 2, and case 3. So it produces similar predictable results or contrasting results. Sometimes when I have, let's say 10 cases that I wanted to study, case A would be telling me stories about A, B, C, D. Case B would be telling me about A, C, D. Case C would be telling me about A, B, D. So you can see some patterns there. The A remain constant, the B and C are variation. So these are things that you find in your study and you can actually discuss about the variations, the similarity, the similar results, and also the contrasting results. You know, maybe the conditions are different. That's why one case give B, one case give C, you know, but the A remain constant. So, okay, this is how the whole case study design would look like. So you develop the theory at the beginning, right? You select your cases. There are various methods of selecting the cases, we discussed that. And then you design your research, whether you want to do a single case holistic design or embedded case design, or you want to do a single case, multiple case, explanatory or predictive, descriptive. It's up to you. And you decide on the data collection protocols that you want to do, right? Then you conduct your first case. You conduct your first case and you write your first report. Okay, and then you conduct your second case, you write the case report, and then conduct the third case, you write the case report. Then you do a cross-case analysis. You compare case 1, case 2, and case 3. What are the predictable similarities? What are the contrasting findings? Then you compare that with the prepositions and the theoretical framework that you've developed at the beginning. Maybe the theory will change, maybe the theory will not change as you go into this the 3 cases. Maybe the theory will shrink, you know, and then you develop a new policy implications or modify the theory, and then you move on to the 4th cases, and then do more cross-case analysis, cross-case reports, and you go on, until at one point, then you say, okay, I have enough information, which is what we call as a saturation point. And you said, okay, it looks like if I ask the 10th or the 11th person, the story will not change. Then I stop. That's how you do it. Yeah. So the process, actually, the report writing and the analyzing is not done at the end like when we do a quantitative research. You know, you collect your data and then you analyze. But here, the analysis is an ongoing process. So it's a very, very active research process. You get a case, you interview, for instance, you use interview, you write the reports, the drafts, and then you do a cross case. And then you go to the next one, you do a cross case. And then you compare that with the theory, and then develop a new theory or a new framework or changes in the framework. And then you go to the next case, and so on, so on, so on, until you find that your data is saturated. That means, no, if I were to choose another one or two more cases, they would be telling me the same thing that I wanted to hear. So you stop. Yeah. Okay. How do you prepare for data collections? That's what I mentioned just now. You need to have a basic skill. First, you should be able to ask a good questions if you want to do interview and to interpret the findings, the answers, and because you're doing it along the way. Yeah. First, you must be able to ask good questions. Second, you must be a good listener. So I think being a psychologist or a counselor like us, we are trained to be a good listener. So those who think that they are not a good listener, you better learn how to listen rather than how to talk. And not be trapped by your own ideology or preoccupation or preconceptions. You know, sometimes it's interesting because when people talk to you, your mind will start reeling and thinking about things related to what the person is saying, and you wanted to say it out loud. So when you're doing case study, you have to train yourself to tell yourself, okay, I have to stop talking and listen. I cannot say this, I listen. So you reserve your ideologies or preconceptions. You know why? Because when you say it out to the interviewee or to the informant or to the participant, then somehow their outlook would be manipulated by you, by your idea. They would then give you responses that you want to hear. And you do not want that to happen. Here, because when you do a quantitative studies and you are collecting your data, you're not supposed to be even there when you collect your data. So the researcher's bias is not there. But when you do a case study or any of the qualitative research studies, the researcher's bias is always one of the biggest obstacles that the researcher has to overcome. So in this case, when you're asking questions and when you're listening to their responses, you have these thoughts going on in your mind. You have to train yourself not to tell what's in your mind when you're doing the interview. But you can cue the interviewee. You can cue them, because sometimes when you interview the person tends to be very quiet and not saying much. So you want to cue. Cueing is different from giving ideas to them. You know, I can say, can you say more, or can you tell me more about what you said just now? That's a cueing. But I cannot say, I think what you said just now is similar to what this theory is saying, and it is saying like this. Then the informant will say, oh, yes, I think so, that's right. So at the end of the day, your data would only consist of responses that saying, that's right, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong. I had one of my PhD students had this. I said, you know what happened here? It's because you said too much and you didn't give time to the interviewee to respond, and you didn't say some more. So at the end of the day, of the 800, 900 pages or even 100 pages that you get, 80% of that is your own words, which cannot be used as evidence. Yeah. The other thing is that the researcher must be adaptive and flexible. You will see opportunities, you will see, or you have to see opportunities in new situations. Let's say when you go and see the interviewee, or when you go to the community, see things changes. So how do you adapt, right? For instance, you're studying about, how would I say, okay, a very traditional community that has a very modern daughter, and when you first interview the daughter can talk to you freely, but then when you go again and see the daughter, this time around the father was around, the father said, no, the daughter has to go into the room. How then you would adjust the interview, you know? So what would be the opportunities you see in this situation? And then you change and adapt to the situation. firm grasp of the issue being studied. I think these skills, I think, dominate all research. You have to have a firm grasp of the issues being studied, or else when you want to ask questions, or when you want to cue the person, or you want to observe the situation, you will not be able to see what you're looking at, or what you should be asking or listening, or what you should be sensing and all that. So you need to have a firm grasp of the issue being studied, and should be unbiased of any preconceived notions, including those derived from the theory. You have to go to the field with an open mind. Of course, you have this preposition at the back of your head, you know. Okay, I'm going to study this, and I know the theory is this, and I know these are the prepositions that I've developed at the beginning. I should be looking at this and this and this and this. But when I observe, let's say I do an observation, when I observe, I should not be observing only those that is dictated by the theory, the theoretical preposition. I should be looking at everything that I could see within the space of the observation, having at the back of my mind these preconceived notions or the theoretical preposition that I should be focusing on. It's kind of difficult to do, you know, because people tend to go to the field and see everything. So this is what I do. When I go to the field the first time, I do my site initial visit, I will observe everything and jot it down. You know, now it's easier for you to observe everything by having a camera and all that. So just take a camera along and just record everything without any preconceived notion, right? And then you go back, you look at that information and you say, okay, where in this information, so where in this step or where in this observation that I've done initially lies my theoretical preposition. So the next time I go, I would then focus on the theory preposition, but again, giving some space for other things to come in. Remember, we talked about theory in development. So when you want the theory to develop, you should not be confining to only the preconceived theories. You must also give space for other elements or other things to come in that would develop the theory later on. Okay? So these are the basic skills. You should be able to ask good questions. You should be a good listener. You should be adaptive and flexible. You should have a grasp of the issue being studied or the topics that you're studying. You should be unbiased of any preconceived notions when you go to the initial visit of your research site. Okay, now I've mentioned about the case study protocol. The case study protocol is actually a document which is needed when you want to make sure that you have done everything that is dictated within your research process. Yeah. So inside the protocol, there must be the instrument, which in this case, if you want to do observation, your observation protocol. If you want to do the interview, your interview protocol. The procedures, the general rules, I should be doing this, I should not be doing this, and things like that. It is very important for you, especially if you're doing multiple case study design using multiple investigators. Like I always do that. I have to interview like 20 people and I have 5 investigators with me, right? If I don't have this protocol, each investigators would just do whatever they like to do. So it becomes a document that will guide each and every one of them. And I can then feel satisfied or feel safe that all of them would bring me evidences that I would like to see, similar evidences. Yeah. So it's very, very important for you to have this protocol, and the investigators must be trained to use this protocol. So the protocol is developed at the beginning of before you even begin the study. You have to develop the protocol first. The instrument, the procedure, the general rules, anything that you think is important, put it in the protocol. And when you use the protocol, it would actually increase your reliability. People would then use the protocol and do the research and get similar findings. That's what reliability is about. Yeah, that means someone else will do the research using the same population, the same sample, and predictably, they will produce similar evidences. So it would actually increase your reliability when you use the protocol. So The procedure should have initial scheduling of the field visit, determinations of informants, whom, what, how you choose your informants, training of the study team if you have more than one investigator, right? So you have to train them to make sure that they actually know what to do. And the protocol becomes their holy book, their guideline, when they are doing data collection for you, yeah? And then the case study protocols and questions. Actually, the questions are for you. It's for you to question. Define, how do I define the case? What are the purpose of my study? How do I build my questions? How do I implement the planning? So these are questions that you want to build for yourself. Then the analysis plan, the case study reports, how do you plan your analysis, whether you want to use a time series or whether you want to use pattern matching or whatever it is, then you put it inside. And also, how do you want to report the cases? Okay. Let me move to the next slide. Okay. So as I've mentioned, the case study questions are questions for you, not for the informant. That's for the informant is the interview protocol. But in the protocol itself, the heart of the protocol is a set of substantive questions reflecting the actual inquiry. And the question is posed to the investigator, not to the informant. It acts as a reminder regarding the information that needs to be collected and why. Why do I need to go for initial visit? When do I see my informant? When do I train? No, things that would remind you. So you have to set all those questions in place and make sure that every question is addressed accordingly along the research pathway. Each reflective question should be accompanied by a list of probable sources of evidence, informant name, interviewees, documents, observation. The questions in the case study protocol should reflect the full sets of concern from the initial design. All your concerns should be there, because if you don't question yourself, you might miss some step, or you might miss some evidences. Maybe the question is should I use multiple evidences? Why I must use multiple evidences? Should I use observation? What can observation do to my case study data finding? So those are questions that you put inside your case study questions. It consists of major questions that the interviewer or researcher should cover during the interview sessions and so on and so forth. Also, because if I study the merger, what would be the big questions that I would like to put inside the interview questions? But then I put it in the protocol. So they would remind me that when I want to interview the interviewee, these are the questions that I want to interview the interviewee. Yeah, okay. So remember, case study questions in the protocol are questions that is posed to the investigator, so that the investigator is reminded of what to do, how to do, and things like that within the research context. Now, how do you collect your evidence? There are many ways of collecting the evidence, right? You have, of course, the normal way of collecting evidence is from interviews. But actually, there are many sources of evidence that you can use in terms of doing your research. Okay, any questions so far? I'm blabbering quite a number of things.
Yeah, Prof, actually, there are some questions. You want to answer now or you want to answer after your talk?
I can answer now before we move on.
I think I just try to summarize some of the questions. Like I think just now when you discuss about the case study design, so some of them actually ask, so can a case study be designed after treating a patient or before? Which one would be better? I think this question might be come from the persons who are doing in the legal or something. So is it like we want to design the case study before or after we treat the patients? This is the questions that I get.
I assume the person who is asking these questions is someone within the medical profession.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you normally design, okay, let's say you see or you saw evidences of a unique situation happenings in a hospital, right? Suddenly this outbreak of viruses and many patients got it, right? And you want to know why this is happening and how this is happening. So then you design a case study and go through the process. After seeing the phenomenon happening, right? But sometimes you have your own idea. Just now, the case study is triggered from the contemporary situation. But sometimes you want to study something out of your curiosity, right? You want to know why some patients are not adhering to rules of taking medication. You know, sometimes some, you know, like old people like me above 60, you are supposed to take your high blood pressure medication every day, but you take it once a week, or sometimes you don't take it until your blood pressure goes shoot up and then you take it. Why are they not following the rules? So you might want to study on that one. So you designed it earlier and then find the subject. So it's up to you. If you see a very interesting phenomenon, then you want to study it and then you develop a case study. Or you can do it at the beginning just to satisfy your inquiry. Yeah.
Yeah, so both might be acceptable, just depends of your
situations.
Situation and objective.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quick question. I think this one's, is it the embedded single case design is similar with focus group interview?
No. Focus group interview is an interview technique that you use to collect your information or data. Embedded design is a design by itself. It's two different things. Yeah. Focus group is used to collect your data in the embedded design, because when you use focus group, you get more data at a shorter period of time, because more people participate in the discussion, which is designed so that there's a social interactions. I used to do focus group with running high tea, so that people can eat and drink and talk. You know, when they drink and talk,
more relaxed.
5 hours, a lot of information you can gather from there. So actual focus group is a technique to collect evidences. Whereas embedded design is a design by itself. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you. Another is like, I think just now Prof also mentions when talking about the constructs, validity, reliability, it's not necessary for us to do all, because some audience are asking that. Is it just one type of reliability or validity? Is it sufficient?
Yeah, that's enough. Just do one internal validity and reliability. If you do a multiple case study, that's your reliability is already done. When you do an internal validity and you calculate the kappa value, then it's done. That is good enough. Yeah. You don't have to do all the 4. Then you will never finish your research.
One more questions about when you're talking about protocol, you know, we actually because we are the beginner, we are not sure how to ask questions. So sometimes when we ask a general questions, so as you mentioned just now, the respondent might not be react too much. So we might need to give some prompting questions for some people. So how can we differentiate the leading means the general question, not leading questions, general questions, and the cubes or the prompting questions?
Okay, there are many types of questionings actually. You have the structured, unstructured, you have the focus group. There's so many types of questionings that you can do. But I always have the main question first. The main question. Then I would have a cue. I do not want to have a leading questions. Leading questions would be like, what do you think of this, for instance? When you say
Right.
something like that,
Negative consequences, leading.
right.
Yeah.
Those are the leading questions. So you might want to avoid those kind of questions. You can cue them. What do you think of this? Da 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 da. Why do you think this happened? Da 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 da. Can you say more? That's a cue question. You know. So you need to have more cue questions than leading questions. Let's say your informant is not able to give you information, and deep down you want to lead the person. Stop doing that. And tell yourself, this case is not a good case. So drop the case, find someone else, rather than lead the person, you know. Because when you lead the person, then the person would give you answers that you want to hear. That's not what you want. Cue the person, 5 times queuing the person, still the person didn't get it. Period. That's it, drop the case. So you must have chosen the wrong person to give you the information. Right?
Yeah. I think we still have a lot of questions, but as I know, Prof, because I know the length of your slide, so we are actually on the halfway. So maybe we continue first, then we
all right.
come back again for the question.
Yeah, at least those are answered. All right.
Yeah.
Good. I mean,
actually, there are a lot of questions. They are so, they want to ask, so excited to ask questions. But because of the limited time, I do apologize for that. Yeah. So
but at least I know they are listening to me. I'm not talking all by myself.
They are listening and they are actually quite responsive.
Okay. Now let's talk about the sources of evidence. Yeah, documentation. When you do a case study, you can use documents, letters, memorandums, agendas, announcements, administrative documents, evaluation, newspaper clippings. These are sources of evidence. And the strength is that these documents are stable, unobtrusive. It is not created as a result of a case study. It's unobtrusive. And broad coverage, long span of time, many events, many settings. So these are the strengths. But it has weaknesses. Retrievability can be very low. How do you, for instance, you want to find administrative documents that talks about certain sensitive issues. And I had that problem before. I was trying to get a document on very sensitive issues from one ministry. It was so difficult. The retrievability is very, very low. Bias selectivity, you tend to select only what you think you like, whereas the document is vast. Yeah. Reporting bias, access may be deliberately blocked. You are blocked getting the access. So although it has its strength, it has its weaknesses. But you can use document as part of your evidence to triangulate the information. Triangulation is when you have 3 evidences that converge into one pattern, which is good. Yeah, which is good. Sometimes the information can be, instead of converging, it diverges from your theoretical framework or your theoretical preposition. But most of the time, if, let's say, your research is good, you will find that the document is saying something that the interviewer is saying, and other informations are saying, so it actually converges into one pattern like that. The next evidence is the archival records. It can be a service record, organizational records, map, charts, list of names, survey data, personal records, diaries. These are archival records that you can use as evidence. It is stable, unobtrusive, broad coverage, precise, and quantitative. You can count how many survey data you have, list of names you can count. Yeah. And accessibility, because of privacy, becomes a weakness there. Again, if you want to get a diary from someone, would a person give you a diary or not? If they are not, if they don't consider this research as of value to them. So accessibility, again, is an issue. The next one would be, interview. Of course, this is a much talked about way of collecting case study data. You can have open-ended, focused interview, structured interview, and all that. It provides verbal reports. Yeah, and you need to transcribe the data accurately as if it has been said, verbatim, words by words. Yeah. The good thing about the interviews is that it is targeted. So focuses directly on the case study topic. If you ask a person regarding the topics that you are interested, then the person will give you the answer. aside from the, I mean, this is different from the document, because in the document or archival records, you have to look for it. Okay, which within the documents actually talk about the topics that I'm interested. So you have to scan and scout word by word and find those informations. Yeah. And interviews are very insightful. It provides perceived causal inferences. For instance, the person would say, oh, you know, the people in my kampong actually don't follow SOP because there's so many people, the old people, they don't care about it, things like that. So there's cause and effect there. Yeah. Now, what are the weaknesses? Bias due to poorly constructed questions. The interview protocol questions are poorly constructed. So when the questions are poorly constructed, then you will not get the information that you want. Responses bias because you're using leading questions. Yeah. Inaccuracies due to poor recall. You forget to bring your tape recorder, and you try to remember what the person says after a 3 hours interview. I mean, it happens, but that means the case would be a goodbye case for you. Yeah. Reflexivity, interviewee gives an interviewer what you want to hear, what we want to hear. So this can happen during the interview. So you have to be very, very careful about cueing and leading the interviewee. Yeah. Now, direct observation. This is also another interesting way of collecting data. You can do site observation, formal to casual data collection activities and use of protocol. But you can also put, so that the whole observation become unobtrusive, you can put a camera at the back. Let's say, for instance, you are studying, you're looking at patterns of teacher-centered teaching in the classrooms, right? You can either sit in the classrooms every day and observe, or you can put a camera at the back so that the camera will roll every day. But in order for you to do that without bias, the first couple of days that you want to observe, you have to make what we call the unfamiliar familiar. Having a camera at the back is unfamiliar thing. It's not part of the classroom structure. So put it there so that it becomes part of the structure. When it becomes part of the structure, it becomes a familiar thing. And the students will not be distracted by, or the teacher will not be distracted by the camera. Or else you would have, every day you would have students coming to the camera and say, hi, you know, things like that, and you don't get the data at all. It really covers a lot of real-time events, very contextual, but it's time-consuming. Observation, direct observation is very time-consuming. You tend to select what you want to observe because there's so many things that you need to observe, but you tend to select what you want to observe. Again, there's a pro and cons to that. If you follow your theoretical proposition, then you would be selective on what you want to observe, which means that if there are other elements that might contribute to the issues, you might not be able to observe it. Yeah? Reflexivity issues, event may proceed differently because it is being observed. No, every day the teacher is teaching this way. Suddenly when you put a camera there or you sit at the back, she changes the way she teaches. So you cannot see the actual thing. Yeah. I had this one time, one lady from New Zealand who wanted to observe young leadership, and she chose space one of the subjects. And she came, the first day she introduced herself to me, and she picked a corner. I said, well, you can sit in my room and observe the work. And she picked a corner in my office and started writing down what she observed. How would you think I feel the first day, right? So, of course, I would do whatever she wants me to do. Yeah, and it's very costly to do direct observation. Participant observation. This is more interesting. Participant observation is where researcher is not only a passive observer, but also a very active observer. You play a role in the study situations and participate in the event. Yeah, it's very contextual, very insightful, but then it's time-consuming, selectivity issue, reflexivity issue, cost. But again, there's a bias to the investigators' manipulations of events because you are part of the whole event. Yeah. For instance, let's say you are trying to observe gotong royong. People are working together, doing things and all that. And while you're doing the gotong royong, two people arguing about whether they should use a cangkul or an axe or a knife. And they started arguing about that. And you are there as a participant of the gotong royong, right? The question is, should I interfere? Should I not? If I interfere, then there's a manipulation of event. If I don't interfere, then these people are going to argue, and it can get very, the scenario is going to be, it's not going to be nice. So what do you do then? Then you have to interpret the situations and make a decision. But your decision must not lead you to have a biased, manipulative investigation. Yeah. Okay, physical artifacts. Technological device, tool or instrument, work of art, physical evidence. These are also something that is insightful into cultural features. Let's say you want to study patterns of eating culture within certain community. So you want to look at the artifacts. But then again, the weaknesses is that you can be selective about choosing what the physical artifacts you want to choose, and so the availability. Whether it's there in the society or not. Seeing one doesn't mean that everyone would have that artifacts in the house. Yeah. Okay. So those are the normal, I would say the normal evidences that we can use. But also remember, we can have films, we can have photographs, we can have videotapes, even the projective techniques, the Roche or the psychological testing results, autobiography. Proxemics. Proxemics are human space and proximity, distance between people and all that. So these can also be a form of evidence that you can use for triangulation purposes. At least 3 types of different evidences that would converge into a pattern. That would lead you to have a very good result, findings from the case study. Okay, these are the 3 principles of data collections in the case study design. First, the principle is you must use multiple sources of evidence. Don't just rely on one evidence for triangulation purposes. Data triangulation, investigators triangulation, theory triangulation, methodological triangulation. So you need to use evidences from different people. You can also use multiple sources of evidence where theories use 3 different theories or 3 different methods of research design, or 3 types of data collection, or 3 investigators, or 3 evidences. So these are all issue of triangulations, and it would increase your construct validity. Yeah. Number 2, create a database. This I mentioned before. Create a case study database. It is important to organize and document the data collection to increase the reliability of the case study. So here, the documents can consist of data or evidence-based reports of the investigator, what happened on the site, challenges, opportunities. So create the database, right? And file it, document it properly, and maintain a chain of evidence. This principle will help increase the reliability of the study. Appoint an external observer. And this external observer would look through all your documents and see whether the evidence exists from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, or the document, the evidence exists in case 1, case 2, case 3. So you need to hire or you need to appoint an external observer. Ask the observer to follow the derivation of any evidence of the initial research question to the conclusion. This is what I'm trying to look at, tell the observer. These are my research questions. These are my theoretical propositions. These are the way I collect the data. These are the evidences. So there's a chain of evidence that leads to the conclusion. So these are the 3 principles in data collection that you must follow when you do a case study design. All right, okay, this is how you select your informants, right? First, I must remind everyone, in doing case study or any qualitative research studies, you don't determine the sample size a priori. That means you don't determine the sample size during your design. But the sample size is determined on how much data you collected and how many would actually bring you to a saturation point. Researcher can select cases gradually and not limiting the number of selected participants until the data reach the saturation point. If you choose samples that doesn't actually fit into your study, you would find that you need more samples. But if you choose your sample correctly, your case correctly, meets all the criteria, you find that your data would get saturated within a short period of time. So it's up to you. You have to decide what are the inclusive criteria, what are the exclusive criteria for informant selection. Yeah. So the number of participants for a case study should be determined by looking at the data during the analysis. Remember when I said you choose a case, then you interview or whatever you observe and all that, and then you collect and write the reports and see how much information you have as compared to the theory at the beginning. Then you go to the second one. And then you analyze again information. Let's say by the 6th or 7th subject, you analyze the information from the 7th subject, for instance. You find that what the 7th subject says, what the 6th subject says, what the 5th subject says is almost similar and saturated what the theory have said, then you can stop. Okay? If repetition of stories occurs among participants and no new information awarded to the researchers by any new participants, then the data has reached saturation point and you can stop. You don't have to select the new participant. Yeah? So these are the rules. So this is what I mean just now. Participant A talks about AB. Participant 2 talks about ABC. Participant 3 talk about ABCD. Participant 4 talk about ABCD. So if I ask participants 5th and 6th, they would be talking about A, they would be talking about B, C, and D. So if I ask more people, 5th and 6th, they would say about the same thing. So should I go to the 7 or 8? I don't think so. It's going to be a waste of my time because the story is the same. Now, there are many sampling procedures. Just like quantitative research, you have the stratified sampling, you have the simple random sample, blah, blah, blah. Here you have quota sampling, purposive or judgmental sampling, chain, referral, or reputational sampling, which is what we call a snowball or network technique sampling. I wrote one paper on this. You can Google in the internet. Deviant sampling, deviant case sampling. You have sequential sampling and theoretical sampling. So I will discuss each one. Now, the quota sampling, this is by Newman 2000, is suitable when a researcher would like to interview a group of individuals with different characteristics, thereby ensuring differences in the sample. So you want to have, let's say, you want to study the COVID-19 spread in the community, but you want to have information from the teenagers above 18 that has received the vaccine. You want to also have a group of adults below 65. And you also want to have the warga emas. So it's different characteristics. So you have quota sample for the young ones, the middle one, and the older ones. Yeah? It's like a stratified sampling. It is highly recommended when you have embedded single case design, when the unit of analysis is individuals of different characters or clustered under one group. It's under the community. All the organizations, the merger, again, the issue of merger, and you have people from the human resource, people from the financial, people from the operation, and people from the business units. Yeah? So this is quota sampling. Now, purposive or judgmental sampling is more acceptable for qualitative research because it involves selecting participants on special situations. So the situations are the phenomenon that you want to study. In this case, purposive sampling is useful for case study in 3 situations. When a researcher wants to select unique cases, so it is purposive. So you choose because purposively these people are unique individuals, so I want to study them because of these issues. But a researcher would like to select members of a difficult to reach specialized population. Say you want to study the Ibans who lives in the jungle, or generation X from certain genetic tree. Very, very selected members of a difficult to reach groups. Yeah. When a researcher wants to identify particular types of cases for in-depth investigation, I would do purposive sampling. Let's say I wanted to study emotional intelligence, but I wanted to do an in-depth investigation of how they manage their anger. So I would choose people who have anger management. Maybe I go to your center, Suwan, you're doing the psychology center and get cases for people who have anger management. So these become my cases, right? So that is called purposive or judgmental sampling. Okay, we don't randomize, yeah, because the data is not going to be statistically analyzed. So don't talk about randomization here. Now, this is chain referral or reputational sampling, and I call it snowball or network technique. Just like snowball, you take the first snow, roll it, okay? The first snow must meet all your criteria, all your inclusive criteria. So when you have the first snowball that is accurate and meet all your inclusive criteria, it would give you a very good data, right? And then what you do is, after you're done with this person, this lady or this man, ask this person, do you know anyone that has similar issues with you? Most of the time they would know. And they would introduce you to the second one. And then you go to the third one, the fourth one by referral. It allows researcher to select participants from various stratified groups and at the same time maintaining a non-biased stand, because you don't know who's going to be your next subject. Yeah. You can also start with two at the same time. So you roll two balls at the beginning and then you ask the person. Yeah. Now, how does it stop? It's very unique the way it stops. When you find that the last person that you have interviewed or observed or whatever, name someone from the group, from the names that have been mentioned or you have interviewed before. No new names are given. That means the network is closed. Let's say, for instance, you want to study how addicts control their addiction through methadone maintenance program. Okay? In a community that might not be many, maybe around 10 or 15 people. And most of the time, they know each other very well, right? So you have the first one that has been using methadone for maybe like 5 years or 6 years and knows very well about the procedure of using methadone maintenance to curb the addiction. Then ask him to name the next one. Done with the second one, ask him to name the third one, him or her, and go on until the last one. Ask him to name, then it names the same person. So you're done with that. It means there's no more subject that you need to interview or observe or whatever. Yeah. So this is called chain referral or reputational sampling, and I call it snowballing. Yeah. The bigger the snow, the better. Now, deviant case sampling, I put here.
Sorry to interrupt you for a while. Now it's 10:30, so maybe we have to we can spend another 15 minutes, maybe another 15 minutes for the slide. Then we can have another 15 minutes as the Q&A sessions.
Yeah, that's what I said. I go with this for three weeks.
Yeah, 3 hours normally.
Okay, this is deviant sampling. So Mark Zuckerberg is a unique person. So he's a deviant person. So something like this, you need to do deviant case sampling. Okay, I'll go very fast. This is sequential sampling. In sequential sampling, the researcher continues to gather cases until the amount of information reaches saturation point, then you stop. Okay, one after another, one after another. Vertical sampling means that your sample that you choose meet your theory proposition. That's very important. But this is more suitable for grounded theory, because ground theory, you need to develop a theory. Yeah. Okay. Now, analyzing case study. This is a more complex. Maybe I'm not going to emphasize so much. This is another broad things that you need to discuss. Yeah. So it's important for you to have a strategy to organize your data. You can either organize your data according to your theoretical proposition, or you develop a description for each case. So each case, you have a description of each case. Then you compare case by case. Or you can arrange your data in terms of your proposition. So this proposition, case 1 data is here. Case 2 data is here. Case data is here. Next proposition, case 1, case 2, case 3, something like that. There are two ways. There are two ways of organizing the case data. Now, in terms of, this is what I mentioned just now when I talk about the theoretical preposition and how it will grow. So this is my theoretical preposition. I keep it, let's say I study about attachment by John Bowlby. That's my theory, right? And John Bowlby talks about trust, communications, and feelings of alienation. I'm sure you're familiar with this theory. So those are my prepositions, but I want to know more about what they talk about trust. So these are the things that I open up in my observations or my interview. And then I collected this information or this preposition as I analyze the data. So the theory actually expands from just trust, communications, and alienation into all this information. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay. Now, this is a case description. So you describe each case by each case by each case. So you have like 10 cases and then you start cross case analysis. Okay. Now, there are many types of analysis. Just now is just the way you arrange your information or you arrange your evidences. But then after that, you need to analyze your data. You can do this manually, or you can use the software, available software like NVivo, Atlas, things like that to analyze your information. Yeah. So you can do pattern matching. I've explained many times about pattern matching, explanation building, like just now, time series analysis, or program logic models, which is a combination of pattern matching and explanation building. Right? But there are many other ways of doing it. Just some info. How many minutes do I have, Dr. Suwan?
Okay, you can still have like 10 minutes, then we have 15-minute Q&A. You can have 10 more minutes.
Okay, I think the rest people can read. So like pattern matching logics, yeah, pattern matching, you have the non-equivalent dependent variable as a pattern. So you develop a non-equivalent dependent variable as a pattern. Rival explanation as a pattern. So that means you have your preposition, you have a rival preposition. It's like you have the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, right? Simpler patterns. You can also have simpler patterns where you have, let's say, one dependent variables, and you just compare each one like that. So these are pattern matching logics. Yeah. Then you can also have, these are the special types of pattern matching for exploratory case study. I think people can read this. This is explanation building, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So you can stipulate a set of causal link. When you explain something, you can see the causal link. Yeah, it is narrative in nature, and the expression building can be stronger when you build it around the theoretical preposition. So that means when you look at the cases, you explain the cases, you use the theoretical preposition as your guiding light. So look at the proposition, look at the data. Where in the data does it explain the preposition? Then move to the next preposition. Where in the data that is explain the preposition? So you go case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4, and so on and so forth. Then only you do cross-case analysis. Okay, the rest I think people can read. Or people can come back to me next time and ask me questions. Okay, these are time series analysis. You have simple time series, you have complex time series, you have chronologies where you arrange events according to chronology and start doing causal comparison. So people can also do this over a series of time. But just remember, time series analysis, that means the data would be extended like 1, 2, 3, 4 years, or within a year, the data is collected at a couple of points. So you want to compare point 1 to point 2 to point 3. Yeah. There's no starting point and there's no, okay, sorry. The program logic model is a combination of pattern matching and time series analysis. So here, you might want to see the cause and effect of dependent-independent variable, okay? For instance, how social distancing help in controlling the spread of COVID-19 virus. And then you might then add on the time series analysis. How social distancing, wearing masks, and washing hands, which is only 3 variables, frequently help in controlling the spread of COVID-19 virus during pandemic and endemic period in community. So that means the time series goes from pandemic to endemic. And then the pattern matching goes to from one dependent variable to many dependent variables. So you can do a program logic model. Yeah? And this is good for explanatory and exploratory case study. I think I'm done with this. Oh, okay, yeah. Analyzing case studies using NBO to be continued in different sessions. This is another 3 hours. Okay, I'm done. Dr. Suwan and Dr. Ko.
Thank you, Prof. Sorry for rushing you up. Actually, we are enjoying, to listen your explanations one by one. It goes details and really increase our knowledge. But due to the time limit, so I have to apologize to you all and also to the participants. So Vivi has a lot of questions actually. They have maybe they want to clarify some of their mind, and since you are here, definitely they want to get some tips from you.
Okay.
So there's one question is like let me see. Yeah, just now Prof you repeated a few times about propositions. So is it is similar to hypothesis or our origin?
No. Proposition is similar to variables. Variables, except that the variables that we talk about in quantitative studies are very specific, right? The prepositions in qualitative studies is a descriptive in nature. So it explains certain things that you want to look for. That's like variables. When I talk about theoretical preposition, which means that you have a framework where the prepositions are attached and explain the causal link between one preposition to another preposition. So from your research questions, you should be able to develop or to identify and examine your preposition. It's like a variables, not like a hypothesis. Yeah.
So there is also questions like what is the difference between data, because just now Prof also mentioned about triangulations. So the audience want to know how to differentiate data triangulation and methodological triangulations.
Okay, data triangulations would be looking at different data collection technique. Okay, method triangulation would be using different research method. For instance, you want to have part of the data to be collected using a survey method, which means that you're doing a survey method, and then part of the data has to be collected experimentally. So you have the experimental method, and then you would have a case study, and findings from these three methods should be deliverable into one conclusion. Okay, so that is methodology. It's the design, yeah. And sometimes I think most PhD students would use at least two. But then they would then concur the findings through triangulation from qualitative case study by using three types of data collections.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So there's one question about how intercoder reliability test plays intercoder.
Oh, okay.
Reliability test. Play
Mm-hmm.
in this play its role in the case study. How we actually do this.
Inter-rater coder.
Yeah, intercoder reliability.
Okay. So inter-rater coder is done two ways. There are two ways of doing it. One is when you have done the case study reports, okay, and using the informant as, okay, let me explain this way. Once you have transcribed the data, right, you give it back to the informant, right, to read the notes and making sure that the notes have the same meaning as what he or she mentioned during the interview and what you understand. But that is not intercoder rater. Okay? Intercoder rater would be the experts in the field, because you want to see across the informant what they are saying actually define the proposition. Okay, so this is what you do. You have, let's say you invite 3 iterator, right? You give the iterator the prepositions and the definition of the preposition. Okay, and then you select randomly data from, say, case 1, case 2, case 3, and give it to all the 3 iterator. Okay, and then the iterator would then look at the preposition and its definition and look at the data and say whether the data that you have picked actually talks about the preposition. And then you calculate using kappa value, the FA minus FC over N minus FC, the frequency of agreement, frequency of chance over N minus FC. Okay, so you calculate that and you prorate it into an index. Then you get the value. If it is 0.8 and above, that means what you have rated, what you have coded is reliable. If not, then you have to recode it again. That is called iterator coding process. Yes.
Thank you, Prof. This one, because most, some of us might be like quantitative research breakouts. So can you provide a brief example for, utilizing case study in skill development? Like how can we use case study then to develop a skills like a questionnaire or some measurements?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Actually, from my own experience, I have 2 patents that I have under my name from 2 instruments that I've designed through a case study. So when you do exploratory case study, you ask the questions of how and why. You get a lot of information. Okay, one of the study that I did was on emotional intelligence. If you can Google me and the information on that one. I interviewed 360 people using case study approach. And from the data, we analyze it and we were able to develop an instrument. It's called Malaysian Emotional Quotient Inventory. It has been used by many people now. It's on sale also by UKM. That the items in the instruments are actually data from the case study. And then once you develop the instrument, then you can do a survey method and actually try the instruments on the population. Most of the time, instrument developed from this process has high reliability. That instrument has 0.97 reliability value, very, very high. So it is good to develop an instrument from a case study. You can also do instrument when you plug from the sky, right? But it might not represent the cases out there. Yes. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. But of course, it will be more complicated and more effort that we have to do in the middle.
Of course. You need more work. Yeah.
Most likely, we will use like thematic analysis to analyze our
data.
Then we come out.
The thematic analysis are pattern matching actually. Okay, if you look at Pat Beasley's book, she called it thematic analysis. Also, Lynn Richardson, Robert Yin would call it pattern matching. But basically, what you do is you find the themes from the preposition. The themes are from the preposition, and then you compare one theme to another, and then you compare one case to another against the theme or the preposition. That is called pattern matching, right? So these are all analysis. Actually, it's very simple to do it in en vivo. I like en vivo because I can always do my protocol in en vivo, my data in en vivo, analysis in en vivo, report writing in en vivo. So I like it very much. And you can do this simply inside there by tagging the themes into codes, and then by tagging the data into the baskets of codes, which is a theme or prepositions. Yes, the themes are actually the preposition. And the themes are the one that has the data. And the data are the one that you compare and match and things like that I've mentioned just now. Yes.
Just now, Prof introduced us many types of data analysis, type of data analysis. Is the thematic analysis can be used like instead of other type of analysis, such as a grounded theory? Is a question from the audience. I'm not sure, is it? Because the aim of my study is to develop a framework at the end of the study. She should be a student, maybe. So her question is the thematic analysis can be used instead of other type of analysis, such as the grounded theory or other analysis that you mentioned just now?
You can use thematic analysis. As I've mentioned just now, the theme is actually the preposition. So when you want to compare one team against the other or cases against a team, those are pattern matching. That's what is meant by thematic analysis. You know, you analyze team by team, and then you look at case by case against the team and see if there's any variation in the stories, right? So thematic analysis can be used in case study, in grounded theory, in phenomenology, in ethnography, in document analysis. It's the same, right? Except that when you do thematic analysis in case study, you have the theoretical preposition at the beginning, the theory, the framework that you have developed from your reading or from existing theories and all that. So when you do thematic analysis or pattern matching, you guide those process with the theory preposition, okay? But when you do a grounded theory approach, for instance, you do not have theoretical framework because your job is to develop a theory or framework at the end. And you do not want your theory to be influenced by existing theory. So it's very much exploring the theme. You have to explore and ask your questions and ask the question, is this important enough for you? Or is this talking about which directions I want to go? There's always a reflective exercise if you use thematic analysis or preposition pattern matching in grounded theory approach. There's always a reflective exercise. And sometimes, that's another story if you want to go through grounded theory approach. There is an issue of going forward and backward into the data. When you do grounded theory, you are immersed in the data, right? And sometimes you get overwhelmed by the humongous data. The data is so much and you felt overwhelmed. You need to step back. You need to step outside and start asking questions. Are these leading me to somewhere? Is this showing me to somewhere? Because you do not know the somewhere is where.
Yeah.
In grounded theory, yes. Yeah, it's very blurry there. Unlike the case study approach, you can ask the questions, is this leading me to that? Is this leading me to that? See, the patterns are much concrete. So it would help you form the final framework faster than if you are doing it grounded theory approach. Because in grounded theory, it's always blurry. Yeah, you have to use a lot of insightfulness. You have to use your insight, your hunches, and all that to start gathering the information into some sort of a pattern.
Just our Prof also mentions few reference that we can actually refer. Some of the book for case study. So can you introduce us some book for case study or some book that can relate?
I can show you.
They show me hard copy.
Okay. Okay, these are case book by Yin that you can refer to. These are this book on the analysis. Yeah, I like this book because my work is in part of this book. Pat is my friend, and this is by Lee Richardson. Yeah, and also you have the qualitative interview book. You saw how much I love qualitative. This is the focus group book. Yeah.
You have a library, Prof. Noriah.
Huh?
You have a library.
I have library of qualitative book. This is just for case study. I have whole stack for ethnography, whole stacks of phenomenology, whole stack of document analysis. So I love qualitative books.
If you don't mind, maybe you can take a picture of few book, not the whole library, maybe. So maybe after I search for the book names, the information, I can share to the participants after that.
Yes.
Yeah, I will say
Of course.
So it will be easier for them, if they want to refer.
If they want to refer or they want to buy the book.
You can just take picture, then I will go and search for the information, then I will share you with the audience. Then
Definitely.
So a lot of book as we have.
I love my research book. I have libraries of research book. Because I used to teach research in the university for a very long time, about 15 years.
Yeah, as we know, actually, like definitely you have a lot of experience in teaching all these things. So we have one more questions maybe. Actually, we have a few more questions since we have time. We will try to wrap out as well. So it's like, what will you do, Prof, if you realize you made some mistake or error during your data corrections? So something like, like just now actually you mentioned that the importance of research protocol so that we can follow, so we won't make any mistake, so we will follow our propositions, make sure we do. Actually, we know there are some way for us to reduce it. So, but it's seriously, you just realize, okay, the questions design maybe, the design question maybe will bring another expectation or my give another response, to, another meanings to our respondent. So what can we do at time? Can we still change it?
Yeah, you can add. It happens to me a number of times. Let's say I go to the first subject and I thought that I had all the big questions in my head, and in my protocols, and I asked those questions. And while I was asking this person also shared something related to the issues, pertaining to the issues, but it has never occurred to me. So when I go to my second case, I would add questions. And then from my second case, I found that there's more things that I need to know. That means I wasn't as exhaustive as I hoped I would in the first case. Sometimes it happens like that. So I add on. But then, along the way, it will stop. Which only means that I need to add a little bit more of my cases to make sure that I cover the topics, the questions that I've add on to my original questions. It would happen to novice researchers who are not as exhaustive as when they want to design the questions, the protocols. So my advice would be for people to actually get a good grasp of the issue, read as much as you can, and also don't stop reading. After getting the data from the first subject, continue reading, see if there is any gaps in your data. And then formulate questions and go to the next subject with an additional question. And see, then you go back and analyze it again and see if there's any more gaps. You might have seen one theory that talks about so you develop proposition based on that theory, for instance, right? And then suddenly this particular subject, let's say subject 2, talks about whatever the theory have said, but with additional information. And when you read again, you found that there's a new theory actually. That talks about the same thing with additional information. So you were not exhaustive at the beginning. So it would expand. That's why in case study, it is called theory in development.
Oh, theory in development.
Yes, it is not concrete. It will develop as you go by case after case after case after case. The theory will develop.
So will we call it as pilot study or no? Actually,
no. It's not a pilot study. It's not a pilot study. It is, the process is like that. In quantitative studies, this is your theory, right? These are the variables in the theory. These are the causal linkages in the theory. Then you take your data based on exactly the theory, right? And then you got your finding to confirm the theory, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen like that in case study. In case study, you have the theory, the preposition. It might expand as you go with the cases, or it might shrink as you go with the cases. That's like just now when I showed the example of the attachment theory by John Bowlby. You start with trust, communications, alienation. As when you go into the theory and the cases, the theory expands. Yeah. So it is developing until maybe 6 case, 7 case, 8 case. I don't see any more development, no more additional information. So I stop. So that means the theory has ended there. Yeah. But I do not start from zero like grounded theory. In grounded theory, you start with zero theory. As you go into the data, you explore the data, you play with the data, you manipulate the data, then you come up with a pattern through thematic analysis, come up with a pattern that form a theory at the end. And that theory might be a concrete or might not be a complete theory. I can take that theory from the grounded theory approach, do a case study and see whether that theory can expand or not. See the process? And then after I end with the case study, develop the instrument, I test it with the survey method and do confirmatory factor analysis and see whether, you know.
Repeat the idea but with different method approach.
Right. Exactly. So you end your life all for the next 20 years doing research on the same topic.
That's why you have the expertise. Thank you very much. I think we will still have some questions, but due to the limit of our time, we can't really answer all of the questions. So thank you very much, Prof, like sharing what is case study to us as the beginner. So definitely we have a lot of things that we still have to catch up. So once again, I have to appreciate your generous sharings, your knowledge as your slide as well. So just for your information for the audience, we are going to share the slide from Prof to you all after our event, and the recording, but we might need some time. We will take some time because our technical teams, they have to finalize those recordings. Then they have to, just for your convenience, we will actually upload to the Utah, YouTube, then only to the CAP website. So it's only for the knowledge sharing purpose. So don't misuse those recordings. So thank you very much. So we have the feedback forms, as you can see under the chat box. It might take use like few minutes to fill in, so that we know what we can improve next time for our events in future. So right now I would like to have a photo sessions. Actually we are a lot of participants, but some of them maybe have class or they have some meetings. So some of them actually told me that they will leave early. So but we still have a lot of participants right now. If you don't mind, can you if you are ready, the most important things, can you turn on your webcam so we can have a photo?
Hi everyone. Oh, so now
finally you see your audience. Actually, there are a lot of them. They will direct message me. They will tell me what is their questions. They will also, actually they are very active under the screen or what.
You know, when you do online, you feel like you're short sendiri. You're talking to yourself. Hi guys.
Like talking to the world, all these things. But actually, they are listening, and a lot of them are saying, "Thank you, Prof. Thank you for your sharings. I hope to see you again in the next sharings." Because when we know due to the limited time, you actually say, "Oh, maybe we can discuss it next time. Maybe we can discuss it next time." So I think they have some expectations already.
Okay. Oh, so there's a lot of comments here that I'm reading it.
So we can have a photo session right now, Dr. Prof. So
smile. I will say 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay.
Thank you everyone for listening to my blabbering. Oh, Ivy. Dr. Tan.
Hello, Prof. I'm enjoying your session as well.
Dr. Tan, I need to introduce you. So Dr. Tan is a lecturer from UTM. So she's the one who contact me and between me and Prof Noriah. So that's why we have the pleasure to have Prof Noriah with us today. So thank you very much, Dr. Irene.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gan, and all the team from Utah.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today as well.
Dr. Tan is my best friend down south.
I'm waiting for you to travel down from the...
I'm waiting for us to work together again this Monday.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Prof.
I'm leaving now.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everyone.
Assalamualaikum.